Hello, I'm Dr. Sarah Sohr-Preston. I'm going to talk to you about being a developmental psychologist. Now, for me to become a developmental psychologist, I got my PhD in applied developmental psychology from the University of New Orleans. Now, to become a developmental psychologist, that's generally what you have to do. You have to get a PhD, a doctoral degree, and usually it is a PhD in my particular field. So that means you have to get a bachelor's degree, so 4 to 6-ish years of getting your bachelor's degree, usually in psychology. If your bachelor's degree is not in psychology, typically to go into your further graduate studies, you often have to at least have taken a minimal amount of psychology classes and have taken particularly your research and statistics classes in psychology. Now, after that, you get a master's degree and then your PhD. Now, many programs are set up so that you get the master's and the PhD within the same program. You're essentially admitted to a PhD program, and the idea is you get your master's along the way. I did things a little bit differently. I got my master's at UL Lafayette and then went to UNO for my PhD. Also, some of our students here at Southeastern, they'll get their master's here at Southeastern, and then they'll go out and get their PhD somewhere else. So you can do it either way. Keep in mind, if you do the master's and PhD separately, it can take you more time because not everything is necessarily going to transfer over. All right, for those of you who don't want to go on to do a PhD, those of you who don't want to do a master's even, what are the options for you if you're interested in developmental psychology? You want to do something similar, all right? So you may end up with a job where your title would not be developmental psychologist. Developmental psychology might not be any part of your official job title, but I have known people who have gone on to do things that have something to do with developmental psychology. Some of them go into applied behavior analysis, which we've got a concentration here at Southeastern. If you do the concentration in ABA, applied behavior analysis, you might learn and become qualified for working with individuals and applying some of the concepts that we have from developmental psychology. Some of the other things you can do, some folks have gone into testing, like educational testing, IQ testing. They have to be supervised by somebody else with a doctoral degree, but they can be the person who does the IQ testing, who puts a report together under supervision. And I have known some people who have done that with, going on from their psychology studies. I've also known people who have gone on to work in places like hospitals, and they get all sorts of job titles and whatnot, like they might be called a technician or a clinical associate. That sort of depends on what's available, but I have known people who've gone on to do that where they didn't go on to get their PhD. Now, they weren't called a developmental psychologist. By the way, if you do become a developmental psychologist, you would not be doing it for the money. It's not a high paid position. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a low paying position, but it's not a lucrative position. There's this weird misunderstanding out there that psychologists are like rolling in money for some reason on TV. They're always living the fancy lifestyle, and that's not very realistic. But a lot of the jobs that I'm mentioning, if salary is an issue for you, that you want to have, a nice higher salary, you're going to want to look into them. You're going to want to look online and see what kind of salary you can get, because it's going to vary, but usually the trend is for it to not be like lucrative, rolling in the big bucks sort of thing. All right, some other things. I'm trying to remember, I was actually looking on a website, and let me just jog my memory for some of the stuff that I was looking at. And things like counselors, going into counseling. All right, so for going into counseling, you can get a master's in counseling, and it can be something like school counseling, marital family counseling, rehabilitation counseling. There's all sorts of names for that, and I'm not a counselor, so I'm not going to be an expert on all the different subfields within counseling. But some folks who have been interested in developmental psychology, they have decided to specialize in counseling, and then they end up working with people and applying what they learned in developmental psychology in their counseling job. All right. Also, social work is another one of those that's not developmental psychology, but adjacent. And what else? Yeah, a lot of, I think. Oh, and then some people will go on to be a research assistant, where they just sometimes it's luck, but you might find a large project where they might have some grant money, and they need someone who has that knowledge. They have that bachelor's or perhaps master's degree in psychology. They know a little bit about statistics. They know a little bit about research methods. And so we have had some students who have gone on to work for developmental psychologists conducting research, and then they get a research position with them. And that's not necessarily going to be like a long-term career. I did know at least one person who did that for a very long time, just working for this person who was constantly in need of research assistants, and they were always there for that person. But those are some of the options. Let's see, let's make sure I didn't leave anything out there. And this website also mentions going into teaching. Like if you really like developmental psychology, depending on which topics you're most drawn to, it might be that you're interested in teaching. And so going into something like early childhood education, secondary education, various things, you might be a good teacher. Now also, in developmental psychology, even though we often give a lot of attention to the younger ages, when we cover aging, adult development, aging, some people get really excited with the research on aging, and so you might want to go into the field of gerontology instead of developmental psychology, or so that's also something to look into. But to be an actual developmental psychologist, you need a PhD in developmental psychology, which means you need really good grades. It's really good if you could get some research experience too. Grades are very important. These are competitive programs to get into a PhD program. And then if you don't think you'd be able to do a PhD program for a variety of reasons, you might end up working in a field that's related to developmental psychology, but not exactly developmental psychology.